Well, hello there. How's it going today? We're gonna do a wheel bearing replacement on a 2011 Nissan Rogue, and it's a pretty self-explanatory job, so I think I should be able to relay it pretty well on video. We'll see how it goes, and we'll see what it takes to get it done. Start by jacking up the vehicle. Make sure you line up the jack with the pinch weld jack point. Every vehicle will be a little bit different. This one happens to be right behind here. Some of them are a little further back. Some of them are right here by where the fender comes on. This one's like 4 inches back. It's a little notch. Some vehicles might have a little peg that comes down. They're all a little different. Just make sure you check it out before you jack it up. I might also note that if you don't have impact tools to take off your lug nuts, you would at first leave the vehicle on the ground, crack all of them loose with your socket and breaker bar, and then once the wheel is off the ground, you can remove them the rest of the way. I have impact tools, so I can do this when it's off the ground. Next, you're gonna wanna remove the hubcap from the vehicle before taking off the lug nuts. In this case, it looks like you do it either way, but I always like to remove it first anyway. Also, if your car has alloy wheels, you will not need to remove a hubcap. It will just be the wheel and then the lug nuts. So you can skip to this step. These are 21 millimeters on Nissans. Like I said, I'm using impact tools, so just zip them all off. In this case, I was lucky, the wheel just kind of fell off. Sometimes they get stuck on really bad. In that case, you could try kicking or hitting on the wheel in 2 different spots. If it really is stuck, you'd probably have to crawl underneath and hit the tire with some sort of hammer, usually a heavier sledgehammer, like a 4-pound hammer. Just kind of beat the tire in a couple spots. You're not gonna hurt it. If that doesn't work and you're really struggling, you're gonna have to hit the wheel. Not recommended, except unless you really can't get it off. So when you do hit the wheel, just be careful not to bend this over, especially on the steel wheels. This will bend. So try and hit it as flush on this outside rim surface as you can. I also like to use the tire as a seat. All right, so in order to remove the wheel bearing, the brakes have to be removed. Seat shield looks like it's seen better days. Probably end up, if it's not savable, just removing it so it doesn't make a scraping noise. So what I like to do is usually I have both front wheels off the ground, and I can turn the whole hub and get to the bolts easier. In this case, I'm only doing one at a time, so I should be able to be just fine. There's plenty of room on this car. So I'm gonna leave the caliper intact, but I'm gonna loosen what looks like 17 millimeter bolts, and then pull the whole caliper off as a unit, and then hang it from the strut. These are a 19 millimeter. Just try to crack these loose here. Sometimes these can be really stuck. I know I didn't really show it too well, but these are the caliper bracket bolts. The big ones on the back, not the small ones that hold the pins in. As you can see, these are very stuck. So I might need to grab a cheater bar. Crack that one loose. Sorry about the focus, but both rear caliper bracket bolts are loose now, so I'm going to continue to run these out. There's one of them. It's kind of stuck in the socket, so I'm going to hit it on the ground. That usually breaks it free. Got both those out finally. So I have these fancy caliper hooks. They're not necessary. You can use a bungee cord. I used a bungee cord for a long time, but these are awesome. You can find them on Amazon. Maybe I'll put a link in the description to where you can get these. They usually come in a pair, and they are entirely worth the money. They're like 15 bucks, and then you don't have to worry about, you know, bungeeing something up. These always work. So take it off, take the caliper off, and kind of flip it so that the brake line isn't under tension. Just kind of put it around anywhere that's solid, that'll hold, and then you just clip it up on the spring. Holds it right out of the way. Again, in my case, it looks like I'm lucky. The rotor comes right off. Sometimes you'll have to beat these off mercilessly because they get rust around here. These were probably done fairly recently. The pads look pretty new and the rotor's not too bad, especially for the Northeast. So I would imagine these have been done within the last 6 months. All right, so I figured now is a good time. We could probably get this axle nut out of the way. First, there is a cotter pin in here, which can sometimes be pretty dramatic to get out, but I'll show you a little trick that I learned from Eric the Car Guy. Awesome YouTube channel, by the way. You should definitely check that out if you're into car repairs. Okay, so the trick is where the cotter pin goes through, it's folded over. So basically, unfold those, grab them with these. Don't cut them, just grab them with a pair of side cutters. Just kind of grab it, twist it back straight. It's not straight, but that's straight right there-ish. And I kind of use the indented side of the jaws where there's a dip to kind of tap the cotter pin through, because it kind of can't like fall off. It'll wedge itself instead of just you hammering it and it's slipping off. It'll just wedge itself. So I get it enough that the round end, which I'll show you in a second, comes out, and you can grab it with these. Again, don't cut it, just grab it, and you can kind of pry it out like that. So what I was talking about, the round end, is I was talking about that. It'll stick out, you grab it like this, and you kind of work it out through the hole in the spindle here. So then you take this lock washer, I guess, for lack of a better term, that off. Might be a little stuck like this one is. There we go. All right, just gotta work it back and forth a little bit. It just gets a little tight on this spindle here. Also, one thing to note, I should have noted earlier, maybe I'll put a little caption in before. You need to loosen this. If you do not have impact tools, you need to loosen this nut while the wheel is on the car. It looks like in this case we got a 32 mil axle nut, common size. So just run that off. Easy peasy. So now the next thing you're gonna want to check is to make sure that this can slide like that. It should move in and out. If you can't push it and it doesn't slide, gently tap it with a hammer on the end here. Just a few taps, love taps. And if it doesn't move, and it doesn't start moving backwards, take the nut, the axle nut, put it on backwards where the flare is facing out. Screw it on until it's, I don't know, roughly, probably most of the way on. And then you could hit this with a hammer. Don't hit the axle itself, because it could damage the threads and you'll never ever get this nut back on. And then you're screwed. You have to get a new axle. Nobody wants to do that. So definitely don't do that. So in this case, this one's nice and free. So we can move to the next step. So it looks like the next step is to take out these strut bolts so that we can tilt the hub forward. So this is a 21 mil. I'm assuming this side's a 21 mil as well. If you have a breaker bar, you're just gonna have to crank on it and hope. I have impact, so this should be pretty quick. All right, now that both of those are removed, looks like this top bolt, maybe it'll just pull out. So you can see the bolt right here. Just pulling it out from inside the strut board. Might need to tap it with a hammer. All right, there's that one. It looks like these are both the same, so it's not too big a deal if you mix them up. There's the bottom one. So now the hub is free to move out like this. So now we have all sorts of room to get back here and move stuff around to get to the wheel bearing bolts. Looks like these are 17s. I've said that once before. I'll try and get a better angle here in a second, but basically just on the back of the hub where all the bolts go on and all the lug nuts go on, there's 4 bolts back where the CV axle usually sits. You just have to remove those 4, and then you have to basically pound out the hub. If I can't get to them, if I don't have enough room moving around like this, I'll also disconnect the tie rod, and that'll make it so I can move this around even more. So I got a 17 millimeter on a swivel right here. Just trying to save me a little bit of arm work getting those out. I'm gonna try to use the impact and get these out. Again, all 4 of these also seem to be the same, so not too big a deal where they go back in. But definitely keep track on yours just in case 1 or 2 of them are longer than the rest. And so now the real fun begins. Basically, in the Northeast, there's no really good way to do this. You basically just have to pound on this wheel bearing in order to get it out, because it's just rusted into the hub. So what I like to do is hit on as far on the back side of this as I can, except this one has the heat shield in it, so I might just bend this over temporarily and whack at this. If that doesn't work and nothing happens, or the hub comes out without the bearing coming out, you can usually get a chisel or a skinny screwdriver or something wedged behind here, and it'll start to work it out. A slide hammer might work too, but usually that just pulls the hub out. Well, that was incredibly easy. So there's the old gross rusty crap bearing. If you listen, that shot. So one thing to be careful of while you're doing this job, in here there's a little plastic like donger that sticks out from the side. That is your ABS/wheel speed sensor that is right here. It bolts in here. It probably isn't a bad idea to remove it, but I can tell you from experience, unless you live down south where the cars don't rust, you're not gonna get it out without breaking it. All right, I just realized something doing the other side. So I took this side back apart. But let me make these mistakes so you don't. On this Nissan, the sensors have to come out first. I got lucky on this side when I took it out that it didn't break it. Because as you can see, on the bearing here, there's this ring that goes around the whole back. So basically, when you put that in, you have to put this in, and then the sensor comes through here and goes in between that ring and the wheel bearing. Not a very smart design. I have to say it's kind of ridiculous. You're probably gonna end up needing new wheel speed sensors. Like I said, when you take them out, they break. So I would preemptively buy these knowing they're gonna break. Just thought I'd add that in there. Just get as much of the crud off of here as you can. I like to clean off this face, and I like to put a little bit of anti-seize on this whole area, so we'll do that now. Now for this part, I do recommend safety glasses, because these wire wheels on these grinders, they spin very, very fast, and when these wires fly out, they will stick in your arm and your clothing and your face. They'll stick in your skin when they fly out, so you do not want one of these in your eye. Basically almost just blasted my camera. I did kind of blast my camera, so I'm gonna move that out of the way. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect, just get it, relatively cleaned off. For the next part, I like to use a little bit of the copper anti-seize, aluminum anti-seize, it doesn't matter. They're both the same. Well, they both pretty much do the same thing. Basically what this does is it puts a little bit of rust prevention in here, because it'll stop the moisture and the metals from reacting to one another as quickly. It'll also provide a little bit of lubricant when sliding this new bearing in, even though it's not that tight of a fit, but it's still a good idea. Also, if for whatever reason it ever needs to be changed again, it'll be way easier, because rusted solid in. All right, so we got the new bearing here. Nice and silent, nice and tight. Good amount of resistance. It's an SKF brand. Definitely recommend going with a good brand of bearing. If you get the cheap Chinese ones, they're almost guaranteed to go within a year. All right, so start with getting your heat shield. Definitely do this first. Don't forget to do this, because you'll be kind of mad once you get the bearing in, you gotta take it back out to put this heat shield in. Get that on there first, and then you get the bearing. You just slide it in onto the splines of the CV axle. Take one of your wheel bearing bolts and try to get it started. Don't run it down tight, just try and get it threaded in. Sometimes it helps to grab the socket to give you a little bit of leverage. Twist it. Take another one. Try to get that one started. Once you get a couple of them started, it'll kind of hold itself there. And then you can just work on getting the other ones lined up. Just finger tighten all of them until you get them all in, and then kind of work them down like you would tighten a wheel on a lug nut. A wheel on a lug nut? That makes no sense. Tighten them down like lug nuts on a wheel in a cross pattern. All right, so in this case, the old girl seems to be fighting me a little bit. So I'm going to run this top one in just a little snug to kind of bring it all into place, but definitely not over tightening it. I ended up tightening the bottom one because I couldn't actually get the top ones to line up properly. All right, so once you have all 4 bolts tightened down, I do recommend looking at the factory spec for those bolts. Tighten them all down. The factory spec with a torque wrench, especially if you're inexperienced and you don't know if you don't have a good feel for how tight bolts should be. I've done a ton of these, and I've never had a problem with my feel after I got used to torquing everything to spec. I just know how tight things are. But if you're new to this, definitely recommend looking at the torque spec. So after you get that all on, you're gonna want to push the CV axle back out through the spline, or through the splines here, and take your axle nut and just kind of finger tighten that on. The reason I don't say fully tighten it yet is because with the hub still moving like this, you don't want to pull the CV axle out of the transfer case. In this case, I think, yeah, the transaxle. That's just a pain. You got to go in and try and finagle it back in. So this gives it a little bit of wiggle room if you do pull too hard or whatever. So then you're gonna want to get the hub lined back up with the holes in the strut here, and I'll bring the camera in a little closer, and we'll get a good angle on that. All right, so I'm gonna turn this a little bit by hand, and you can see the 2 bolts here that we took out earlier, and the 2 holes here. You just got to get them lined up. Usually what I'll try to do is get this kind of pivoted up into here, get the bottom bolt through, and then push and get the second top one through. This does take a bit of hand strength, so if you don't have very strong grip or strong forearms, you might want to have someone help you push this while you kind of arrange this. It might be very helpful to have a friend help you. All right, so there's the bottom one through. Then I take the top one, I kind of squeeze and push the hub in, and then get that bolt through just like that. And at this point, you can run down your axle nut and make that nice and tight. There is also a torque spec on this, so make sure you torque this to the correct spec. After you have that ran down to torque spec, you have that little lock washer thing, castle washer thing. Put that on. This one did not come with a new cotter pin, so if you didn't destroy the old one, this one's not the greatest shape, but it's also not weak and flimsy, so this will be just fine to reuse. But if you did destroy the old one, definitely get a new cotter pin. If you go to Harbor Freight, they sell kits of all sorts of different sizes. That's what I would recommend. It's cheap, it's like $5. You get like 300 of them. You'll never really need to worry about it again. Just gotta tap that through. Once it's through, take this side and just bend it over. As long as it's locked up like that, it can't go anywhere. So it's just fine. Just make sure it's folded over at least one direction. So now take your two nuts that went on the struts, the strut bolts, put those back on. And you can run these down nice and tight and make sure you torque them to spec. Now another good thing you could do is put a little bit of anti-seize on this fresh new hub. So just take some of this, spread it around here, especially on this part. This is what your wheel sits on and what the brake rotor usually gets frozen to. So you take that, juice that up nice and good, and then it doesn't hurt to just slap a little bit right on the lug studs. All right, so now make sure the rear face of your rotor isn't all rusted up. If it is, use the wire wheel to clean it. This one's pretty good, so I think I'll just leave it as is. You don't want to put one back in that's all pitted and flaked, because it won't sit on the hub flat and it'll cause it to rock. And you'll get a shake when you push the brakes. So definitely make sure this is pretty clean back here. Put that on there. Now, one thing I do recommend you do, get a spacer of any kind. This is just like a crush clamp for a hose. Doesn't really matter. Then take a lug nut and just finger tighten it to the point where your rotor is held kind of from flopping around. Some rotors have the screws in them and you wouldn't need to do this. This one does not, so I would do this. It just makes it easier to put the caliper on after. So now we're gonna take the caliper off the hook up here. And we're gonna try and slide it back on the rotor here. Just like that. So that's where this nut comes in handy, because without that, the rotor would be flopping and you couldn't get get it to sit on there properly. So then take your caliper bracket bolts, kind of finagle the caliper up and down until you can get them to line up. Sometimes it can be a bit of a pain, just because you think it should go somewhere, but it doesn't. So just keep trying until you get it. One thing I usually try to do is I put pressure, like I'm pushing on the bolt towards the front, and I move this around until I feel it go clunk, and then I know that it's seated in the spot where the threads are, and then I can start to turn it, and usually it'll catch threads. So I'll take the other one, and I do the same thing on the bottom. So in this case, I'm going to take the adapter that I used earlier, stick this old girl on it, use my impact gun to run these in. Well, Nissan was nice enough to make it so I didn't have quite enough room to get to the back one, so I will be using, or the top one, so I will be using the ratchet on that one. So this is about how tight I'm gonna give it. Plenty tight enough. Take this lug nut off. Basically, you're all done. You just need to put the wheel back on. So I will do that now. Okay, once all those are finger tight, take your impact gun, in my case, or in your case, you'd want to tighten them a little bit more with like a ratchet, as tight as you can get it, and then lower it down and torque it the rest of the way. I only have the torque or the impact gun on the low setting, and I'm not running them down as hard as it'll go. I just needed to seat on there firmly, and then once the vehicle's on the ground, I will torque them to spec. We'll gently lower the vehicle down. Right, so this part is actually very important. When you tighten the lug nuts down and the wheel's on the ground, I definitely recommend torquing them with a torque wrench. The wheel is the most important part. If the wheel falls off, you have nothing. So I have a pretty nice torque wrench here. You don't have to get one as nice as this. Any torque wrench for a wheel will do. You don't need extreme accuracy. So you can go to Harbor Freight and pick up one for like 30 bucks, sometimes 20 bucks. It'll do exactly the same thing, and just make sure you torque this wheel down. And once that is torqued down, you can take your hubcap, line the slot up down here with the valve stem on the wheel. Just kind of work it back on. They can break, so be careful. All right, thanks for watching. It turned out pretty good actually, not too much went wrong. Pretty self-explanatory wheel bearing job, only took like 3 different socket sizes. Definitely something I feel like anybody should get into if they want to replace their own wheel bearing. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you come back when I post more videos like this. See you later.